Listening, it was a case of actually the issues already covered in the bill. Mr Speaker, it's a good bill and the government supports it.
Speaker.
The Honourable Trevor Mallard.
Mr Speaker, it's been pretty rare that I've seen a bill supported with less enthusiasm than by the National Party fourth whip, as he has just done. Well, I can count a bit better than that member can count, and I think that member knows that. Mr Speaker, I want to support the bill, but in doing so, I want to say that I regret two things. One, the bill has not taken full opportunity to be thorough in its bringing together of the privacy issues and to do all the things that could have been done when we have a bill with such a wide scope as we have now. And secondly, to make the pretty basic point that the Privacy Commissioner is already overloaded with work. One only has to ask the question about the Minister Judith Collins and the report that has been done for getting on for a year now, into leaks of ACC information by the Privacy Commissioner, and that has not yet been reported publicly or to the House. And Mr Speaker, it's I don't want to go into the detail of that because it wouldn't be appropriate for the third reading of this bill, but it is important that the Privacy Commissioner is properly resourced in order for her to do her job properly and to make the reports for which undertakings were made that they would be made in a relatively short time, nearly a year ago. Mr Speaker, this government does not have a good record in the privacy area. I think the standout one, the one which has caused a lot of embarrassment, ministers to come and go, is the sending of private information to Bronwyn Puller. It's clear that the protocols which sit within some agencies and the software that sits within some agencies is just not good enough. And the idea that in this day and age, whole massive files involving 6,748 people are kept on some spreadsheet which can be attached to a document and sent out is just not acceptable. And Mr Speaker, that clearly has to change. And in the Puller case, of course, not only was the private information sent to Ms Puller, but her name was then leaked to the media as well as a lot of the information. Mr Speaker, it's not often I agree with Michelle Bogue. In fact, Michelle Bogue and I have had a history of disagreeing on lots of issues, but I do accept her statement that when you can't send a communication to a government minister without fearing that the privacy of that communication is going to be breached, that's very, very dangerous. And I agree with Ms Bogue on that particular comment. Mr Speaker, Paula Bennett is someone who has a very poor history around privacy. She released details of women who were receiving a benefit when they had the temerity to criticise her for pulling up the ladder up which she had already climbed, using the TIA to further their education. And Mr Speaker, what is worse is that Ms Bennett has not ruled out doing it again. And so the point that I'm trying to make is that this government does not have a good record around privacy, and what is important in these matters is that there be trust. Trust is very important with individual ministers as well as with the institutions that they represent within this Parliament. Mr Speaker, the Select Committee did do a good job on this bill. The bill, in fact, does some things which Mr Borrows himself announced yesterday that the government was going to do. I mean, maybe he was just sort of like re-announcing something that had been announced about 3 years ago and brought into legislation. But the question of information sharing between Work and Income New Zealand and the Inland Revenue is very clearly dealt with in this legislation. In fact, it's dealt with in such detail that, as well as the general changes that affect all government departments, there is a specific third reading that we're dealing with now that goes to the Tax Administration Act 1994, which does the belt and braces, and as to borrow the expression of Heke Parata, what it does, Mr. Speaker, is to indicate to the Commissioner of Inland Revenue that, notwithstanding the normal secrecy provisions, there are procedures available under this Act for the Commissioner from time to time to supply information which would normally be kept secret in order to facilitate the stopping of fraud. Now, Mr. Speaker, we had a grandiose announcement yesterday on doing this again. I think what we'll find is that when the Chester Burrows and his team have a careful look at the legislation that we're passing today, they'll find that the additional information sharing legislation vis-a-vis WINS and the Inland Revenue Department is totally unnecessary, because as a result of this legislation they will have that power. And I say to members opposite, good on them. No, this is necessary. No one likes people who cheat on their benefits. But what is also important, Mr. Speaker, is that we get some decent information sharing going around, for example, the contents of trusts and the Inland Revenue. We get some decent information sharing going around the location of where people live and the parliamentary service, for example, so we do not have a repeat of the very embarrassing situation that we had involving the Minister of Finance and the lack of clarity as to his place of normal residence. So I think it is important that this information sharing occurs, not only to, and more importantly, not only to get people at the bottom of the heap, but also some of the individuals who are responsible for the $1 billion a year of estimated tax evasion in New Zealand. You know, there's a lot of discussion about, $60-odd million worth of benefit fraud, and that is wrong, but it pales into insignificance when it is put alongside the $1 billion of tax evasion that this government seems very reluctant to go after. And Mr. Speaker, I don't want to go into a lot of details, but anyone who has a look at the register of pecuniary interests and the trusts that are involved in that, one will see why some members opposite are reluctant to have proper information sharing, because as a result of that proper information sharing, they would no doubt be required to pay more tax. They would be required to do that. So, Mr. Speaker, in summary, this bill it's okay as far as it goes. It is much better as a result of the work of the Select Committee. It is much improved as a result of the work of the Select Committee. The government has missed the boat in doing some more. They have cherry-picked out of Law Commission recommendations in the privacy area. But, Mr. Speaker, what we do need to do is to have proper legislation which does help much more than this public service efficiency. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Call Mike Sabin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Please take a call on